Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Joe. My name is Joe Escobedo, and very excited today. This will be the first episode we will have outside of Asia Pacific. So very excited to have on the show Delphin Pasado. Thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Joe, for having me.
Wonderful. So for those of you who don't know Delphin, which you probably should already know him very well, he is the former marketing director for BitBar. He's based in Finland, so very excited to have him on the show to kind of share what's going on in that part of the world, especially for the folks here in Asia Pacific. So we're just going to dive right into today's session and find out a bit more about Delphin. So can you share one thing that very few people know about you?
One thing that very few people know about me and that you hardly will find on my social media profiles is that besides my marketing career, I have been emergency medical technician, paramedic for almost 17 years. I don't do it anymore. This has been a volunteer activity and even included several major disaster reliefs with the International Red Cross. So this has been something I have been keeping in my side. And yeah, it has been very rewarding. And I have never wanted to really publicize that. So it's just kind of in the side of my marketing career, which is my main occupation, of course.
So that's pretty incredible because I haven't saved any lives in my entire life, that I know of. So it's quite interesting to see that you've kind of done that for a living and for quite a while. So very interesting. Now that we talk more about kind of your marketing background, because you have a very seasoned kind of marketing background. So what would you say has been your biggest professional achievement to date? And maybe could you share a bit more in terms of how you achieved such a milestone?
Well, actually, I have been working in many companies or for many brands, small, big, and gigantic. So from gigantic companies like Microsoft or Nokia to very small 10 people startups. But I would say one of the biggest or one of the achievements that I'm really proud of is when we started at Nokia back in the days when Nokia was the global leader in mobile phones, the social customer service, meaning when people was engaging on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and even of course in China, we were covering the Chinese social media, in Russia also the specific ones. And the people was asking, how do I set up this on my device? Why this doesn't work? How do I update? All these kind of things that were coming through a simply marketing channel, but that at the time nobody was asking. So I started together with another couple of people this project at Nokia, and it was super successful. And after 18 months that we started it, we had circa 150 people behind the operation of the social media customer service, and actually we won quite many awards for that operation. And that was back in 2012, 2013, when you could count with the fingers of your hand how many companies at global level were doing this, the social customer service. That has been so far one of the biggest achievements of my career.
It's quite interesting you say that, because I think a lot of companies think of social media as just for marketing purposes, maybe for recruitment, but I think there are very few, hopefully increasingly more, who are leveraging social media for customer service as well. So interesting to see that you're one of the pioneers in that space.
Yeah, that was, and as I said, when we went to the stats, to the metrics, for example, on Facebook, we found out that more than half of the conversations that were having place in our Facebook channels, our Facebook pages, more than half were about support, about how do I do this, what, or actual, well, complaints. Things don't go always as smooth as we would like. There were people complaining about things. So more than half of the conversations were, and that was supposed to be a marketing channel captions.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you've kind of started with the customer to find out what kind of questions they're having. I think that's where you've kind of seen the rise of YouTube now in B2B, is a lot of people asking how to, or how do you do something, and then them turning to YouTube, for example, to find out the answer. So I love that you're starting with the customer, finding out what kind of questions they're having, and then creating some solutions off the back of that. So kudos to you on that one.
Actually, that was pretty much the dynamic. We were trying to get ahead of the questions before the customers or the fans were asking a question. We would have the answer, broadcast the answer, because we already knew based on many other factors. And if we could create an asset, small JPEG, small infographic, or an actual video addressing that question or that problem, and proactively send it out, that was one of the, and that's what we really achieved pretty much in that practice. The challenge though was that we were doing it in 27 languages, so that
Wow.
was the added complication, because of course Nokia was a global company. Well, it's still a global company, so yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges.
Wow, 27 languages. That's pretty intense. I think that makes sense why you had 150 people working on it, the project. Well, great.
Exactly.
I think that's obviously a great achievement, being the pioneers in that space. Now, a lot of times we talk about successes, but I don't think enough we really talk about kind of failures or obstacles or certain things that you found challenging in your career. So maybe could you share a little bit more in terms of a kind of a challenge that you faced in your career? Maybe how did you overcome and learn from that experience?
Actually, yes, because yeah, you are right. Many people just kind of brag about their successes, their medals, their awards, and so on, which is fine. But pretty much nobody talks about failure, which is also okay. I think we are humans, and we are, of course, sometimes we don't get the things right. I don't know, rather than pointing out to very specific mistakes, I have had many mistakes in my career, of course. I have tried to go to the root why I had those mistakes, and I have found out that many times is poor communication. Poor communication with the team, poor communication with few other stakeholders that you may have to interact with customer support, with the sales, with the customer success. So that has been so far the main driver, because you are, or we marketers are so focused on what we do. Sometimes I call this horse view, tunnel view, that we just need to turn our heads and talk to sales, talk to customer support, and that's the base of everything. And that has been, I have realized the problem of many of my failures, that we just didn't communicate good or enough with those other folks that also work in our company.
So I'm actually really glad you said that, because I was in a meeting just an hour ago with a client, telling them that exact same thing. They were saying, okay, we have this new marketing team on board, and obviously we have a sales team. And I said, okay, are you guys talking to each other to find out kind of what are the customer and salespeople struggling with? Because they can give you some really good insights in terms of customers, in terms of the content, the messaging. And they're like, no, not really. And I see that a lot with different organizations, not really bridging the gap and talking to each other, like you said, and that leading to a lot of issues down the road. So I'm really, really glad you brought that one up, because I think it's a big, big challenge I see in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, is the alignment, mainly, I would say, mainly alignment between sales and marketing. That has to happen. Yes, we may come from past experience of different cultures in the country, within the company, that prevent that. But come on, it's 2020. We must communicate. I mean, at the very least, between marketing and sales. Otherwise, that doesn't look good. Doesn't look good the future of our efforts.
I think that's very good advice to anyone listening to this right now. Now, obviously, you've been working in Finland for a while. How does doing business in Finland really differ from other parts of Northern Europe?
Doing business here, I would say, is pretty standard in the Nordic region, meaning Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. That's part of the roughly to the same community, or the same way of thinking. And in particular in Finland is listening and not talking unless you have something meaningful to say or to do. And they are direct, straight to the point. If they don't say it straight to the point, better they don't say. So as opposed to other ways of doing business, like in Southern Europe or like in the United States, which is more about how much you talk, how much you say and sell and features and throw more and more and more and more. Here, the generally speaking, the way of doing business is, of course, super serious, but to the point. Yes, I would like your product. Tell me more about that. Yes. And if I really don't want it, don't need it in the B2B space specifically,
Mm.
they will say it. You know what? That's it. No, we don't see the point because blah, blah, blah. Reason one, two, three, straight to
Mm.
the point. Thank you, bye. Or conversely, if they don't like it, you like your product,
Mm.
SAS, yes, we want it. It's like a more straight, talking more straight of doing business rather than going around and around and around. For some people like it. Some people sometimes find it a bit blunt, a bit too much.
Mm.
Oh, wait a second. So it's just a matter of getting used to. And as in many countries in Europe, Europe is relatively small compared, of course, to Asia. But
Mm.
every small country has if not completely, has a very particular way of doing business, and that's why you have to be aware if you are intending to come to Europe and do business here.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like Asia Pacific, although it's, one continent, you have many different cultures in a very relatively small area. So it's interesting to see kind of the candidness or the straight talking of kind of the Northern Europeans. I find that somewhat here with some other cultures, but I personally find it very refreshing. I like to get to the point. I feel like it saves a bunch of time, instead of, like you said, going round and round, trying to figure out what the other person is talking about. You can get to the point and actually get things done much faster. So I personally appreciate that approach. But yes, I understand how some people could find that quite blunt or too straightforward at times.
Excessively straightforward, or it's just because that has been also done, has been a problem to some Finnish companies who want to sell, for example, to Spain, to Italy, to France, that
Mm.
of course they have a completely different dynamic, and they just don't understand why they don't answer me right away. This is my product, this is the feature, this is how it solves your problem. Say yes, come on. Why did It's because they have, in Southern Europe, they have a different way of doing things, and it's not wrong or right. That's the way they do things, and that's sometimes where, Nordic people in general, Finns as well, say, okay, they are difficult. It's difficult people to do business with. No, it's just they are different. They are just different people.
Yeah, those cultural nuances are quite interesting. I see it quite a lot here in Asia Pacific. Well, so it's something to keep in mind when you're doing business in Europe. Um, So Finland is actually a very interesting place because it actually usually ranks among the best cities in the world for work-life balance, but then it also has kind of a thriving startup scene as well. So what do you think are contributing to these two kind of factors or scenarios?
Yeah, it's pretty famous that both Helsinki as a city and
Yeah.
Finland as the whole country consistently ranks in the first places, two, three, or four, five places in any list or ranking that you could find, from
Mm.
quality of life to gender equality
Mm.
to the less corrupt country in the world. So yeah, it's pretty common that the Finns is already kind of used to. And if we are not in the first place, hey, what happened? Why we are not in the first or second or third place? It's like, it's particularly with the startup community. You may
Mm.
have said or may have read in several economic newspapers that circa the 10% of the startup exits
Mm.
globally come from Finland. So how come a country so small, 5.5 million inhabitants, sparsely populated, really, how come they have such a power? How come it has become such a powerhouse in startups? And the story begins back when Nokia was, of course, the most important company in this country. It accounted for something like 2-3% of the gross income of the whole country. Of the
Wow.
whole country, one company. That was okay. That was a bit of risky. So the Finnish government understood after the Nokia debacle passed, understood that they could no longer rely just in one company for the prosperity of the country. So then let's go back to the innovation, to the ideas, and let's heavily supporting both startups or entrepreneurs, innovators, and venture capitals or angel investors. So the
Mm.
government has been purposely investing money and investing efforts in projects that uh, favor both parts, the investors and the innovators, to come together. Even if you have a small idea, you could find here in Finland free courses to kind of develop your idea. They advise you in business matters, how to set up a business, which is fairly easily, no bureaucracy whatsoever. It's
Mm.
fairly easily. How do I start to recruit people for my team? How do I grow? How do I get access to this or that technology? So there are many resources, to the extent that they were also thinking, I believe it's already in place, a specific visa. If you want to come
Mm.
here and be an entrepreneur, not because a big company brings you here and pays you a higher salary. No, if you have a good idea, an innovative idea, you can come here and actually apply for the entrepreneur visa, and you get all the support from the government to go and do it. And I believe already 2-3 companies, actually from Vietnam, if I'm recalling correctly, they have come here, and after all the support that the Finnish government have given, boom, they are now thriving. A shoe company, actually I remember, it's called Rens.
Mm.
They make shoes out of coffee.
Wow.
Sounds like, yeah, and there, if I remember, both guys are Vietnamese. They came here and boom, they have successful launch and produce, and now they are selling it globally, not only in Finland. They are selling globally their product, which is kind of unusual. Shoes made of coffee. There you
Yeah.
go.
No, that's an incredible story, though. I think the fact that the government is putting all those resources to kind of boost the local entrepreneurship scene is incredible. Hopefully, you'll see me there one day. I'll get a entrepreneurship visa, and I can, you know, be alongside you. But that's really heartening to see that the government is, really emphasizing on that. I think not only that, but I've heard like the education system is really good as well, and that kind of sparks a lot of thought around kind of entrepreneurship and creative thinking and innovation. So I think Finland is obviously doing a lot of things right, and it's proving itself in the success of not only the multinationals but the startup scene as well.
Yeah, the startup scene, they have been really supporting all entrepreneurs. Yes, as the average rate of startups is like 90% of the startups, it's said that fail because
Mm.
of whatever, no good product, no product market fit, many other problems. But for those who really, for that 10% that have a brilliant idea, that they do have a product market fit, I mean, they have all the support here in Finland. You can have, yeah, as I said, many things, including fiscal benefits for the first
Mm.
years. Of course, that's what the government wants. And there you go. That's what has been featured in many economic publications. Why 10% of the exits are come from Finland.
Mm. No, it's very interesting. It's I think a lot of countries should perhaps follow suit and do something very similar to that. To see the same rise in innovation in their countries. Now, Delphin, you've worked in obviously very large organizations. You've worked in smaller organizations, and we'll talk a little bit more back within the startup space. At what point do you think a startup is large enough that it should outsource some of its marketing activities?
I would say that there's never early enough, let alone outsource, but to start with a marketing strategy. And
Mm.
that's what I have seen many startups, even here, that they have a good product. They focus excessively on the product and the building the company. That is fine. But how are you going to put that product in the market? To whom are you going to address it? How is the communication that you will use? Many companies, they just leave that as a second thought, and that's
Mm.
what I have seen. One of the biggest mistakes, that let alone outsource it. Have a person in house that drives that strategy. Then you may have few or no money to do it. There's still ways to do it, do the marketing with no money. Absolutely. So then when you start to have some income, some revenue, of course, reinvest it in marketing, which is the main driver, should be the main driver for your sales. And I would say that is never early enough to have a marketing person in-house.
Mm.
Yeah, sometimes it's kind of more convenient, economically feasible to outsource
Mm.
certain piece of your marketing. Well, as you want to do it, but having that marketing strategy since the very beginning at startup, I guess that's one of the key things, to know where you stand, where, how your communication is, how your positioning is in the market. I would say that that's absolutely key. So there's not early enough to start with marketing.
Not only enough. I think that's I was speaking with one of the embassies recently, and they were telling me the same thing. They have a portfolio of different companies, and they were saying they have, you know, great products, great services, but they really haven't found, you know, haven't started putting together the marketing strategy. Or if they put down their marketing strategy, they've only thought about it in the local context. So for example, let's say it is a local Finnish company. They don't really have a marketing strategy for expanding it into Germany or France or, for example, Singapore. They don't have something like that in mind. They just think, okay, the product's good enough, we'll just run with it and hopefully everything will work out, which not necessarily the case a lot of the times.
Yeah, you know, you touch a very interesting point because, as I said, Finland as a country is a small country, so it's a small market. So whatever you sell, whatever you offer, pretty quickly you get your quota of the market because it's a small country. So very quickly, the companies here have to get out to look for new customers. Normally, they go out in the same Nordic area, typically to Sweden, to Norway, to Estonia, because they are like us, like find that cultural affinity. But it's pretty quickly. Now, one of the new approaches is, if you have a good product, don't just go to the neighboring country. Just go straight to the major leagues. Go to the UK. Go to the US. So that's the mentality of many Finnish companies. And I don't know if you see the same. Like, well, Singapore, of course, is small. I know the companies there. I would say that very quickly, the local market is too small. If they want to grow, they need to go out, and that's when the marketing strategy comes into place. Since the very beginning, has been or should be born global, should be born international. I don't know. That's how I see it.
Yes, I see the same thing. It's the exact same situation here. I mean, Singapore roughly has a population of around 6 million people. So the market becomes saturated very quickly. So a lot of smart organizations have a regional focus. So for example, they may start on Southeast Asia. So they may be in Singapore, then they may go to Indonesia and Malaysia, or they may go Asia Pacific wise. So they may jump to Korea or China or Japan. And then from there, once they think that they've done well enough, they'll usually expand into Europe or the US or Latin America, and they'll go global. I've seen a lot of different brands do that. I think TWGT is a tea company here, and it was founded here, and then they just expanded globally, but the base is still out of Singapore. They've, you know, realized that they can grow only a certain amount here, and then they realize massive opportunity for what they do globally. So there's a lot of different success stories out of Singapore and companies that are trying to go global or at least expand into the region to, you know, reach certain customers. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I know you've kind of been in the software and B2B space for a while. So question I always get is, what is the most effective kind of channel you've seen in B2B, especially for lead generation in the software industry?
In the software industry, or particularly what we call SaaS, software as a service, which is actually one of the main products that Finland exports, is content, 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 and more content. Really is showing how your product would benefit to the prospective customer. And I've seen it, yeah, in my last assignment at Bitbar. We had roughly 65-70% of the traffic, and also 65-70% of the leads that ended up in an opportunity, concrete opportunity, came from organic searches, meaning came because of the content that we were publishing. Whatever the form, blogs, infographics, videos, we were pretty much also focusing a lot on video on YouTube. But all those leads, the last count that I got, were worth millions of euros, and they came from a content effort that costed few thousands of euros. So there you go. It have seen it first person. Content pays off big time. It is not fast, certainly. It is not the quick, easy button, but in the long term, it does deliver concrete, real business opportunities.
I think that is perhaps one of the best pitches I've ever heard for content marketing. As a
Okay, well,
as a content marketing guy, that makes me very excited to hear that it is making an impact. It means I get to keep my job for a little bit longer. I think the kids will be happy about that.
there you go. But yeah, but the key thing, I guess, it's you may have a very varied marketing mix. That is fine. That you have different channels, different ways to approach it, always experimenting. But the key thing is to measure which one is the one that is really delivering your results. And I'm focusing on that one for overall for the C-suite, for the bosses, for the owners, for the board of directors. They don't care if you have one more Google ad here, one more Facebook ad there, or one tweet, whatever. They care about, okay, how much revenue has been driven by marketing, or even how much profit actually has been driven by the marketing efforts. So that's what they care. So measuring and finding this fine line, connecting all the dots all the way until, yes, this opportunity came because of this channel or this activity or this. It's not the easiest thing. No, it is not easy, but it pays off that to do that effort.
Yeah, so very good point. 2 points I want to bring up. One of which is speaking in the CEO or the board of directors language, because a lot of times we speak in terms of like MQLs or leads and so on, or clicks, and it doesn't really translate to CEO or the founder. And they're looking, as you rightly said, for revenue, for profit, for kind of harder business metrics that are going to drive their organization. So I think it's important for marketers to keep in mind what the CEO and what kind of language they're using. I'm going to challenge you here because I think that's the holy grail is you can track the entire process from as soon as someone saw an ad to purchase something. I think it's a little bit easier if everything is an e-commerce space. I think it gets difficult offline, and that's why I wanted to ask you more in terms of like the offline activities that you've done, at least in the B2B kind of SaaS space. Has that made an impact? If so, how have you gone about tracking, to your point, the online and offline kind of purchase?
Certainly, it's a challenge actually, because back in the days when I started in marketing, there was no internet. Maybe I'm dating myself already, but there was no internet. There was no such thing as social media. Therefore, there was no Google Analytics, no attribution, no nothing. Pretty much everything was kind of offline, if you want, but we still had to prove the ROI of that radio ad, that outdoors ad. It was different, of course, different times, but with all these marketing tools and automations and things, we have become used that everything has to be measured and everything has to be attributed. Otherwise, it doesn't count. Hey, there are many things, including those that are offline or events or word of mouth, I would say, that you can assume, you can take some assumptions, you can correlate, but it's sometimes difficult to find the causation. Correlation you find, causation is a bit more difficult. And that's one of the points that I have been trying to advocate with one of my peers here, is not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that is measured matters. So you have to think, all this growth mentality, which is fine, it's great, but all this growth marketing approach that everything has to be measured, optimized over the optimization. Yeah, fine, that is fine as a process, yes. But how are we connecting the dots? How are we giving our prospect customers a reason to like and to trust our brand? One more, two more, 1,000 more Google ads, however optimized they are, okay, that's fine. But why our prospective customers should like us? Why, even more, why should they trust us? Because until they trust us is when they are going to buy our product. Is an overall online is when they are going to put the credit card there to in our e-commerce or whatever we sell online, put the credit card to buy our product. If there's no trust, I'm not putting my credit card anywhere that I don't trust. So how do we build that likeness, that trust? That's where many growth hacks fail. Actually, that's what I call the human-centric marketing. Give the people, give the prospects a reason to like you, to trust you, and to find some affinity with you. Build the audience first. I would say build the audience, and build the credibility. All the ads, all the hacks can come later. Yes, fine. But if the people don't trust you, don't like you, and don't trust you, there's very little chance to for you to succeed, really.
Actually, that's a very good point. The whole notion of trust, particularly in B2B, like you said, if they don't trust you, they're not going to do business with you. So it's one of those things that a lot of marketers, especially not so much marketers, but CEOs find quite difficult to stomach, because it's one of those things that can be challenging to measure. Going back to your point, kind of not everything that can be measured matter, not everything that matters can or should be measured. And I think trust is one of those things that is slightly more difficult to measure, but it's one of those things that make a tremendous impact, like you said, from the customer and actually from their purchase decision as well. So, ideal situation, there is something that can, measure that trust. I know there's kind of like different surveys and different ways in which you can communicate with the customer that way, but it's difficult to really, put a specific number on trust among your prospects. What do you say?
You can kind of get a hint of it. You can always have post purchase surveys, customer support surveys, net promoter score, all these kind of things those really help. But how do you put all together to make sense? That is certainly not an algorithm. That's certainly not an AI, artificial intelligence thing. This is the best marketing analytics tool that you have, the one that you have right between your ears. That's the best one to connect the dots and to find, okay, yes, this is the behavior of the customer, this is the consequence. Therefore, yes, we have this result or this increase on trust or on brand awareness or what you want. That's one of the things. That's what I say. Yes, that's the best analytics tool, the one that you have right between your ears.
I love that line. There's so many great lines, I think, of this interview. That's one of my favorite as well, is that the best kind of analytics tool you have is right between your ears. And you're absolutely right. I think going back to your whole your point about human-centric marketing and being really kind of understanding the customer sentiment and, how they trust you or if they don't trust you, a lot of that just happens right here. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Even overall, as you said, in B2B, that is crucial. You can throw all the ads that you want, all the PowerPoint presentations you want, shiny and features and benefits and all the things that you want. But if the person, namely the salesperson, likely, who is telling that story to the prospective customers, if those customers or those prospects don't trust that salesperson, thing is over. That's it, over. So how that salesperson is actually building his or her own credibility. There you go. I mean, marketing and sales, again, back to the beginning of the conversation, they have to work together and talk together all the time.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think prospects have to not only trust, the brand, the product, or the service, but also the people selling it. So making sure that the salespeople are reputable, making sure that, it's someone that they can trust. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if they trust the brand, the product, and service. If they don't trust the person selling it to them, the deal's not going to go through. So very, very good tips. I'm glad you brought up those, Delphin. Extremely helpful. Thank you so much for sharing. I really, really appreciate it. If people want to get in touch with you and find out more information or just kind of connect, what's the best way to do so?
On LinkedIn. Definitely, LinkedIn is the platform for excellence for business, not only B2B, of course. You can find me there, and I hope that you can just spell my name. If I say it, it's a bit complicated to pronounce my name, Delfin Basallo. But anyway, if you find it written in your post or in your notes, sure, I will be there in LinkedIn. And that, of course, that they just mentioned that, okay, they listen to us through your podcast. That's it.
Got it. So yes, I will definitely include your full name and tag you so people know exactly how to get in touch with you. So thank you so much, Delfin. I really appreciate your time and your efforts today. If you're watching the show and you found it helpful, please feel free to share it with your colleagues or anyone who might find it helpful. Thanks so much, and we will catch you next time. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.